What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated over on Fan Nation. We have a special episode of the podcast for you today, Thursday, February 17th, coming to you live from beautiful but cold today, I might add, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Max Torres, as I said, and on the other end is Dylan Reubenking. He's a reporter for us at Ducks Digest. How we doing, Rube?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a really hectic week battling both, Ducks Digest stuff and the transfer portal. Kind of a dead week for college football stuff though, which is really interesting. But college basketball is underway. It's ramping up in the middle of February, so it's a super exciting time. Everybody's starting to kind of get into college basketball now. If you weren't paying attention before, this seems like the time everybody gets into it.
Absolutely, man. Well, it's not quite a dead, time for college football news as we will kick off the podcast here, doing something a little bit different with this episode for you guys listening on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're tuned in on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. We are doing kind of a mash of headlines, so kind of hitting on some Oregon-centric headlines across football, basketball, and then also some Pac-12 news. So hang in there with us as we kind of work this out. But it's an idea that Dylan and I are pretty excited about. So with that being said, let's hit into our first topic of the day. Dan Lanning looks like he has made a new addition to his coaching staff in Greg Jones, former Liberty North High School coach out in the Kansas City suburbs. And it's an interesting hire for sure, just because of the timing of it all. But it also makes sense considering that Lanning is a Missouri native, as we all know. Got Jones's Twitter pulled up here on my screen, so I just want to read his thank you note. Thank you, North Nation, for allowing me to be your head football coach for the past 5 years. I got to work with some of the best coaches, teachers, and administrators while coaching some awesome kids every day. It is time for me to move on to the next chapter of my life. My family and I are excited to be heading to the University of Oregon to be part of the Ducks football staff. # War Eagle. # Go Ducks. What do we think of this one, Dylan? I know it's not someone that we know too much about, but I think if you're able to get a guy like this out in Missouri, I think that it's an overall good move.
Well, Dan Lanning's got connections out there, as he grew up in I believe, the North Kansas City area. And Jones has been one of the best head coaches of the last 5 years at Liberty North. I got a little bit of intel from a colleague of mine, Mitchell Riverall, who works at KQ2 Sports out in the Kansas City area. Said, from what I'm hearing around KC, this is a really good coach to get. Said, the past year they went 11-2, year before 9-3, year before that 11-1. So sustained success as a head coach, and it's always nice to have that, that coach that has that head coaching experience. I know a lot of people were talking about that as kind of a slack towards this new head coach or this new coaching staff, rather, that they don't have a whole lot of head coaching experience compared to the last one. And albeit it is at the high school ranks, there's still something to be said about being able to manage a team for the last 5 years and be able to, contain that success. And from what I read, I believe he was last season they finished Class 6 state runner-up in the 2021 season. So it's nice to have that connection to the Missouri area, because I believe with Dan Lanning's connection, I feel like the Midwest is a really key place for recruiting for Oregon.
Glad you brought up recruiting there, Dylan, because I feel like that is kind of one of the big picture benefits that I see for the Ducks with Lanning making this move. It's worth noting that this hire hasn't been officially confirmed or announced by the university, but with Jones going on social media to talk about it, and I think I saw some local outlets out there doing a story on it. It looks like it's pretty fair to say that it's going to happen, but just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. But as far as the recruiting impact, Dylan, we're seeing the Ducks make a push into Missouri. More recently on the recruiting trail, everyone knows about Kevin Coleman out of St. Louis. He was, really heavily considering the Ducks, got out here for a visit. I thought they were in a great spot until, the coaching transition happened. He ended up going to Jackson State, which I wouldn't say shocked a lot of people. I mean, they kind of emerged late, I would say. It didn't shock people the way I think that Travis Hunter's commitment did, but still a huge get for Jackson State regardless. So I think the Ducks are starting to push into Missouri a little bit more lately. And then I know another guy that I talked to out of the St. Louis area is 2024 wide receiver Ryan Wingo. And he's definitely excited to get out to Oregon. And it seems like it's another fertile recruiting ground for the Ducks to push into.
Well, yeah, I mean, just setting boots on the ground in any area in the country, because they've got it pretty much set up in the Pacific Northwest. You'll think that they'll get it figured out in California. Not so much lately, but I think that's going to be a spot that they'll prioritize in the future. And then obviously in the South, with all the SEC connections they have, I think they're kind of set there. So the Midwest is a really interesting spot, just because there's a lot of talent that I feel like kind of goes underlooked because of everybody in California and Texas and in the Southeast area. So then in the Missouri area, we saw it a couple weeks ago. They offered a few guys. I forget which high school it was, but they offered a few guys from the same school. So you could tell that they were going after guys from that area. Dan Lanning being from the area definitely helps. So having that hometown connection with Dan Lanning is really neat to have.
You can never have too many connections in this recruiting industry. It's all about relationships, as we know. So Lanning going back into his home state of Missouri to try to strengthen Oregon's presence there. We don't know what role Greg Jones is going to have at Oregon just yet, but you figure kind of with the timing, it's maybe like an analyst role or quality control kind of a deal, maybe. That's just speculation, but yeah, with the timing, we're going to have to see what what title he ultimately gets. Wanted to start the show off with that story just because it's Duck football focused. Any other notes to add there, Dylan?
Well, I'm just excited that they now have a former head coach. I think that's a really good pickup, a really good mind to have. And having that sustained success, winning 9 games, 11 games, being a runner up in their respective class. That'll help Dan Lanning, I'm sure. I mean, it's a totally different game being a high school head coach than, head coach of the Oregon Ducks, but there's just not a lot of head coaching experience. People that have managed a coaching staff, managed a team like that. So, and I would imagine, this is kind of speculation too, but I would imagine that they probably go back, being from the same area. I bet Dan Lanning knows Greg Jones pretty well. So I kind of trust his judgment here with this hire, because taken from the high school ranks, is something that we haven't seen yet with this coaching staff. So, maybe it's a risk. I'm not really sure, but if it's something in the analyst role, can never hurt to add another mind like that.
Absolutely. All right. So that's our first story today. And moving on to our next story, Pac-12 focused. It is reported by SunDevilSource.com that Arizona State quarterback Jaden Daniels intends to enter the transfer portal. Things are obviously pretty wild out there in Tempe right now with a lot of coaching departures. I think Antonio Pierce is probably one of the biggest names that is kind of in that same headline. I believe he's looking for an NFL job if he didn't already land one. But, all of that going on, the coaching staff departures in the midst of the NCAA investigation. It's certainly not looking too great right now out in Tempe. If Daniels does indeed end up entering the transfer portal, hasn't done so yet, but multiple reports coming out. The one from SunDevilSource.com that I referenced, and then I believe The Athletic also reported it. So looks like it is going to happen here, pretty shortly. What do you make of that, Dylan?
So just to confirm, Chris Hummer of 247 Sports tweeted 43 minutes ago, as of 12:18 today, that Jaden Daniels has officially entered the transfer portal, according to one of their sources. So it seems like that is all set in stone.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the Arizona situation just got even tougher, because Jaden Daniels was one of those guys who, was going to bring a little bit of stability to that team next year, given, like you said, so many coaching changes. A lot of guys entering the transfer portal. And I think Jaden Daniels was that guy that they still could fall back on, because it doesn't feel like he's reached his peak. But the last 2 years have just not really seen the kind of development that, we were hoping for. A lot of people were hoping for after that 2019 year, where he looked like he was the future of that program, and that Arizona State football team was going to be, running the Pac-12 South for the next couple of years. You saw him after that win over Oregon. Jaden Daniels looked like, within the next year or so, he's going to be the best quarterback in the Pac-12. And we just haven't seen that. And so now I feel like they're kind of in scrambling mode, trying to figure out who their quarterback's going to be, the coaching staff situation. I believe they're probably still under investigation for some of those, some of the things that have been going on throughout the offseason. And so, now with Jaden Daniels gone, you have to, it almost feels like a rebuild for Herm Edwards over there, because last season was a real disappointment. I mean, you make it to a bowl game, but the way they were winning football games was just not a way that you can sustain. I mean, they were playing sloppy football, even with all the talent they had. I mean, penalties upon penalties, just fundamental mistakes, really bad turnovers. You just can't win football like that. I think they were the most penalized team in the country, if not the Power Five last year. So, I felt like something had to change. I didn't feel like Herm Edwards was going to be the guy to probably get the axe, but pretty much everybody else did. And now Jaden Daniels is, looking for a new home. So it's really interesting time in Tempe. And I'm interested to see if they jump into the transfer portal to try to get a veteran, maybe JT Daniels, another Daniels. Maybe that's an option, because he's really one of the last guys with, Power Five experience and, particularly Pac-12 experience that they could go after.
It's a good name to watch, Dylan. I like what you mentioned about the 2019 season. Obviously, for Oregon fans listening to this podcast, when they think about that ASU game, it'll rub them the wrong way. But that was Daniels' true freshman season. And I think just it gave us kind of a snapshot of what, ASU could be under Daniels, with how well he operated as a freshman. Definitely, I think, after that asserted himself as one of the top signal callers in the pack. But in 2021, he played 13 games, was 197 for 301 for 2,381 passing yards, 10 interceptions, and 10 touchdowns. And then on the ground, because he is a very mobile quarterback, he had, let's see here. Sorry, let me find these stats. 138 carries for 710 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 54.6 rushing yards a game. So kind of giving you a little bit more context into the production that, ASU could potentially be without. Like you mentioned with Hummer saying it's official, but kind of just wait until it's officially official, as we tweeted like a million times throughout the offseason when the Ducks were filling out their coaching staff. But I think, just some other tidbits on Arizona State. I think they have a pretty good, encouraging rushing attack. And Daniel Ngata is a guy that I think a lot of people out there are encouraged by. LV Bunkley Shelton is another guy that I think I know Oregon was after for a while coming out of high school. So that's it's certainly a big loss, the face of the offense. But it just adds to what's been a pretty crazy offseason as far as Pac-12 quarterback movement, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting to watch with, just starting quarterbacks really moving from school to school. You saw Bo Nix go to Oregon. I feel like that kind of kicked things off. Keaton Slovis going to Pittsburgh, and then Jackson Dart going to Ole Miss. You thought maybe USC would get one of those quarterbacks back with the Lincoln Riley era, and then they both go on, and it looks like they're going to be starters replacing some NFL quarterbacks. And then USC gets Caleb Williams, probably the headliner of them all. Washington gets Michael Penix, a guy who had a really good 2020 year, banged up in 2021, but still a lot of promise there. One of the sleepers, I think, Jaden Delora going to Arizona. We've talked about it a little bit on the pod with Arizona and the success that they've had in the transfer portal and in recruiting. I feel like Jaden Delora having those 2 year and a half of experience, really gives them a kind of an edge that they haven't had before. And so just movement, I mean, it's going to be kind of a new look for the Pac-12 with all these transfer quarterbacks that are going to be most likely starting. And I feel like Arizona State is going to be in that list. I feel like they're going to bring in a transfer quarterback. I think it's, I'm not sure who else they have behind Jaden Daniels, because I know Paul Tyson is an Alabama transfer, I believe, last month to Arizona State. So I'm not sure if he's a guy that they feel comfortable starting, but maybe they try to get, a JT Daniels or another guy with starting experience. So, yeah, the transfer portal is taking over the Pac-12, the starting quarterbacks.
all the movement's been absolutely nuts to watch. I think the one that I'm probably the most intrigued about would definitely be Delora going to Arizona. I feel like I was talking to my roommates last night. I'm like, I feel like if there's a fringe bet or like a futures bet that I could take, I would want to put it on, Arizona just next year because I'm so intrigued about the additions that they've made. Obviously, Delora was really, really talented young quarterback during his time at Washington State. Showed that he wasn't scared of the big moments, even being a younger guy. And then some of the additions that Arizona made over the offseason, you look at Reubenking, the former Oregon commit, that was definitely one of the biggest losses in this 2022 cycle. And then you have Rayshawn Luke out of St. John Bosco in Southern California, who I believe was named Under Armour or Adidas All-American Bowl MVP. If that's correct, I'm pretty sure it is, just from what I watched. And then Kian Burnett, also from Servite. They got I was gonna say, is it a quartet? I think of Servite guys, because I remember when I went out there. So they have Kian Burnett, McMillan, Noah Fafita, the quarterback, and then Jacob Manu, the linebacker. So you look at all those additions, and it's really encouraging. And then they also got they also got Jacob Cowing, who I know that Oregon was looking at for a while. So they're doing. I'm not saying like I'm expecting a monster season from them by any means, but I think they're definitely going to surprise some people next year.
Yeah, I mean, they won one game last year. I don't remember what the losing streak was, but it was a long losing streak in Tucson, stretching from a couple years because they went winless in 2020, and then lost a good chunk of the games in 2021. But man, if there's a team that can really flip it around and kind of pull, I wouldn't go as far as saying what Baylor did, going from 2-7 to Big 12 champs, Sugar Bowl champs. I feel like Arizona could be a team that maybe wins, I would say max 8 games, just because the Pac-12 is crazy. You never know. It's kind of one of those survival of the fittest things. They have a lot of new pieces, so it's hard to expect a team with that many new pieces, especially starting that, they would pull off a comeback season like that. But I mean, their schedule is kind of favorable if the talent adds up on paper, and Jed Fish is a really good coach. I know it may not look like it after the year they had last year, but the job that he's done rebuilding this program, going from 1-11 to the roster they have now, is really impressive.
Yeah, so Oregon is scheduled to face Arizona next season, the 2022 season, on Saturday, October 8th in Tucson. So that's a matchup that we know is going to happen. Ducks aren't supposed to play Arizona State next year unless Arizona State and the Ducks were to meet in the Pac-12 championship game. But one final note that I kind of want to add here that came to mind, Dylan, before we move on to our next story, is that I think just because you have these transfer quarterbacks coming in with some experience, I mean, it's not a guarantee that they're going to be successful, right? I think definitely you see the allure, I guess, of bringing in some good talent from the transfer portal, from the Power 5 level. But I think there's something to be said about having continuity in a program. I think that definitely helps a lot. Maybe when you look at a place like in Arizona that has some people who've played a lot of football last year because they had multiple quarterbacks that I think played like 5 or 6 games last year. I know we saw multiple guys when they were here playing Oregon, but I don't know, just something to throw out there that I think is kind of worth keeping in mind as we kind of look towards what these rosters will ultimately look like as we get into spring ball, in the next month or so.
Yeah, when you bring in a new star quarterback, you definitely want to help build around him. And I feel like Arizona's done a really good job of that. I feel like the offensive line might be a little suspect, but I feel like the skill position players are as good as they've had in quite some time, even going back to 2013, 2014 when they were in the Pac-12 championship game. And so and the defense I feel like has a lot of talent, a lot of really young talent for Arizona. I say that with quarterbacks needing to be built around, just because USC, I feel like they loaded up on skill position players and they have a lot of holes still left on their roster. And I think that, they shouldn't be done yet just because they added so many guys who, can catch the ball and run the ball. They need guys that can block and defend too. So it's really important to build guys around your shiny new quarterback. And I feel like Arizona's done a pretty good job of that.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, moving right along, transitioning over from some football news. Obviously, got to start the pot off with that because that's kind of what people like talking about the most, I feel like. But we are in basketball season, and Dana Altman and the Ducks added a new commitment on Wednesday in Northwest Florida State guard Brennan Rigsby out there in Florida. Like I just said, he's a guard. He's a freshman listed at 6'3", 180 pounds on Northwest Florida State's official roster. I think this is a solid pickup for the Ducks. But one cool thing about going to a lot of these games recently, I think up until after I got through the Monday game against Washington State, I'd covered a game, an Oregon Hoops game, for 5 straight days. I was in Corvallis last Friday. I was at the Stanford game, the Cal disappointment, and then the Oregon State women's game as well. So that was really fun. But I bring that up because I got to meet one of my homies I've kind of gotten to meet covering these games is Michael Vissenberg. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right, Michael Vissenberg of Pro Insight. And I was just kind of talking to him about this commitment, and he was actually able to hook me up with some thoughts on kind of what he thought about this addition for Oregon and Brennan Rigsby. So I'm just going to read off some of his notes, and then we can kind of continue talking about the impact that Rigsby could have once he gets to Eugene. So this is from Michael. He says, good shooter with range, mostly works off of the ball as a catch and shoot guy, works well as a secondary playmaker, really bouncy, creative finisher at the hoop, works well in transition, will work well going downhill off of a pass, is all right with the ball in his hands, can dribble through, not at his best running the team's offense, more of a scorer, so maybe a little bit more of a supporting role, it sounds like there. Playing for one of the top-ranked JUCOs, comes off the bench and gives a good scoring punch, should bring good energy and plays with confidence and swagger. 6'3", as we said before, with a 6'4.5" wingspan, has some real vertical pop, which we can see. I think that's what I was seeing like all day yesterday when I was seeing new tweets and videos about Rigsby, is that he's super bouncy. So some real vertical pop, someone who can definitely finish above the rim at times, has close to a 40-inch vertical. So, I mean, not a bad addition at all for the Ducks. Definitely lots of reason to find encouragement in that evaluation from Michael. Super athletic and seeing that he can finish at the hoop, but it sounds like he may not be an instant impact or instant starter kind of guy as we might be expecting with some of the other 2022 commits that the Ducks have, and Kalel Ware and Dior Johnson.
It's funny. You texted me yesterday saying, "Oh, Oregon just landed a hoops guy, a JUCO guy," and I was like, in my head as I was looking for it, I'm like, I would bet money he's from Northwest Florida State College, and sure as heck, he was. That's exactly where he's from. Dana Altman has just created the weirdest pipeline known to college sports. I swear, from Northwest Florida State College to the University of Oregon in Eugene. He got Chris Duarte, he got Elgin Cook from there, both NBA players. Elgin Cook, I believe, is bouncing around the G League now, if I'm not mistaken. But Chris Duarte having a solid rookie year with the Indiana Pacers lottery pick. And so I feel like Dana Altman just knows what he's doing with the JUCO ranks. He's picked up a lot of guys across the country over the years. Most recently, Rivaldo Suarez, one of the top-ranked JUCO players last year. They get Chris Boucher, Dwayne Benjamin. I mean, they've just done, I think Cavell Bigby-Williams was another one, if I'm not mistaken. They've just picked up a lot of guys who have made impacts over the years with, from the JUCO ranks, which I don't feel like a lot of major programs will really do that consistently. And he just seems to find these gems. And Brennan Rigsby, like you said, might not be that instant impact guy who's going to come in and bring that pop. Maybe they kind of ease him in, because next year the depth is going to be interesting, as we'll probably talk about. Just who's going to return, who's going to come back. Never know what's going to happen with the transfer portal. You never really can tell anymore with how a roster could look next season. But I feel like he's one of those guys that could be maybe like an 8th, 9th guy off the bench. Provide a couple buckets. Like you said, not a guy that's probably going to control an offense. I really like his potential as a shooter off the bench. I feel like you can never have too many good shooters. And I really like the fact that he's athletic and can finish. I do feel like that's one of the weaknesses Oregon has with their backcourt is you've seen a lot of times where, they just kind of get those point blank finishes. Jacob Young, Davion Harmon, Will Richardson, even they kind of get close to the basket and they can't finish all the time at the rate you'd like to see. And so having guys that are able to finish in traffic, finish creatively, can kind of adjust, contort their body. And I think Rigsby is a really good fit for that. And, to bring kind of that swagger, the confidence, the energy. You never really can have too much of that either. And I feel like this Oregon team is already kind of loaded with that. Frank Kepnang at the top of that list for sure.
Oh man, I love watching Frank play. He seems like he can get a little bit I don't want to say out of control, but sometimes that energy costs him with some fouls, which is kind of a bummer. But when he's blocking shots and getting active in the post, it's real fun to watch. Kind of the last point I wanted to hit on here that you already alluded to with the addition of Rigsby is what the outlook kind of looks like, right? As far as the roster that Oregon is poised to have next year. Rigsby comes to Eugene once he gets here with 3 years of eligibility. And we know that Oregon's going to lose at least 3 players from this 2022 roster. And Jacob Young, Will Richardson, and Eric Williams Jr. as well, with all of those guys being redshirt seniors. So looks like seniors of some capacity, whether it be redshirt or just a straight up senior. Just double checking here on the website. So yeah, that's kind of what we know Oregon's going to lose next year. You talked about the shooting. You can never have too many shooters, which it kind of feels like Oregon's lacking a little bit right now. But we can talk about in the next segment. But yeah, I mean, just it's another dynamic athlete coming to play for Dana Altman, which is kind of, I feel like a common thread in all the guards that he's kind of added in recent years.
Yeah, I think beyond Dior Johnson, I'm not really sure what you have with the guards. I feel like Rivaldo Suarez is one of those guys. Devion Harmon, I think, has 1 more year, if I'm not mistaken, of eligibility. But maybe he tests the NBA draft waters. And so beyond Dior Johnson, I mean, the backcourt looks pretty bare. So I think it's nice to pick up a guy who, has a bit of versatility. I think you'd probably like him as a true 2. I don't think he's big enough to play the 3, and it doesn't seem like he's as comfortable with the ball in his hands as you'd want in a point. But I really like his, the pick and pop kind of stuff. I like to be able, you like guys that can catch and shoot. Dior Johnson's one of those guys that can just, he'll draw in defenders and, he can kick it out to the open man. And Brendan Rigsby sounds like a really good fit with him.
Dana Altman working to get the Ducks to the NCAA tournament and also at the same time working to build his roster for the future in the 2022 season. We're going to be talking about more Oregon men's basketball on the other side of the break as the Ducks get ready to head to the desert, and that'll be coming up right after the ad break. All right, we are back, and the Ducks are headed to the desert, as I said, on the other side. Ducks headed to Tempe to kick off a road trip in Arizona, where they'll face Arizona State on Thursday. Ducks coming off a win on Monday earlier this week over Washington State in a game that was a little bit too close for comfort, to say the least, Dylan. Ducks built a 9-point lead going into that final minute at Matthew Knight Arena after Will Richardson knocked down a 3, and then some sloppy ball handling resulted in 6 points in just 14 seconds for the Cougs. So that game obviously didn't end how they wanted it to. Feels like Will Richardson has been hitting a bit of a tough stretch for the Ducks of late. And, I think that's the best player on the team for Oregon and certainly the best shooter. So hopefully, if you're the Ducks, you're hoping that he can kind of get back in stride here as you head into this game on Thursday.
It felt like watching the end of that Washington State game. It was really similar to that UCLA near collapse in regulation with just the inbounding issues and, giving up quick baskets. I mean, Michael Flowers almost had a 3rd 3 in the last minute to send the game to overtime. And then Noah Williams had a look. I'm not sure. I think he got it off, but wasn't really close at the buzzer. So, yeah, way too close to comfort. Washington State is a solid team, probably from the outside looking in the tournament ranks, though. I think Oregon desperately needed a win. Not like it would really boost their resume so much, beating Washington State at home, but losing would have been way worse than it would have been good. And so it's nice to have, a win to bounce back from what was the disappointing Cal game. But Will Richardson, speaking to his struggles, they desperately need him to step up, because it just seems like it's kind of been a revolving door of who's the number one scorer for the backcourt with Harmon, Young, Richardson. It feels like if one guy's playing well, maybe the other two are struggling a little bit. It seems like one of those three every game seems to have a poor shooting night the last few games, and they just can't afford that. I'm not saying everybody has to shoot 50% every night, but you'd like to have some consistency and guys step up when it matters the most. And Will Richardson, I definitely think needs it. And I think a big part of that, I think the outlier was kind of the second half of the Cal game, just because nobody else was really contributing. He scored 20 points in the second half alone after scoring 2 in the first. It's just, I think the offense is starting to kind of roll back into what it was doing earlier in the year when they were falling short and kind of getting rocked by, BYU and Houston and St. Mary's. It's kind of lacking in player movement, and you're seeing just a lot of this ISO ball, and Will Richardson's had to do a lot of that. And you're not always going to, get those shots if you're just stepping back and hoisting threes. I just feel like there needs to be a lot more flow, especially when you play against the Arizonas and Tucson, when you play against Washington and Seattle. Those are two really good defensive teams. And, Will Richardson's going to have to be his best if they are wanting to go in there and win to boost their resume and get into the tournament.
Taking a look here at Will Richardson's last 5 games. Let's go back to the win at Colorado. That was huge for the Ducks. First time winning in Boulder since Colorado joined the conference rather. Richardson finished with 13 points on 6 of 12 shooting. And then continuing that mountain road trip against Utah, 25 points on 10 of 18 shooting. And then Stanford last week, exactly a week ago, finished with just 12 points on 3 of 14 shooting, with 5 points coming from the free throw line. And then, like you mentioned, that game against Cal, I feel like he was the only one that was doing anything in the second half. I remember I tweeted out something. It was like, I don't know, probably around, it was under 10 minutes left in the second half, and he was the only person who had scored for the Ducks shooting. Everything else was kind of coming from the free throw line. And then against Washington State on Monday, just 3 of 7 shooting, and that resulted in 7 points. So I remember at the end of the first half, I was kind of looking around to some of my other media buddies, and it said, Will Richardson's only taken 1 shot in that first half. So they definitely need to get him rolling again and just shooting the ball. It feels like just, get him to put up some more shots and hopefully get some more production from him there. Just some more numbers for Richardson. Currently ranks number 2 in the Pac-12 in 3-point percentage at 43.4%. And he's 4th in the conference in scoring with 15.4 points. So I think that the potential is obviously there. And Folly Dante and Frank Kepnong in that game on Monday, I feel like they really kind of carried the load for the Ducks on both ends, just being physical and getting some good scoring in the post. But man, when you go against this Arizona squad on Saturday, game day is going to be there. The atmosphere of McHale is going to be rocking. Arizona is 22-2 overall, 12-1 in the Pac-12. They destroyed UW in Seattle earlier this week, and then they get Oregon State tonight. So that's kind of the picture right now for Oregon men's basketball.
Yeah, and I think speaking back to Will Richardson, when Oregon has lost a lot of their big games that they probably should have had, home against Colorado, against Houston, against St. Mary's, games that would look really good on the resume right now if they had won. Will Richardson has not shot the ball very much or at all, shot very well at all, because Colorado in that loss, he took 8 shots. Against Houston, he took 4. Against St. Mary's, took 7. So I just feel like you have to get your best player the ball and let him score. But obviously you have to create for him. You can't just let him, dribble for 20 seconds and then huck up a shot like they were kind of doing against Cal. I mean, he's creative. Let him get to the basket, because he's as creative a shooter as they have on their team. But I just think that their offensive flow needs to get so much better. And it's got to start with this Arizona State team. This Arizona State team is just abysmal. But it's still a Bobby Hurley team. It's still in Tempe. It's still in late February. I just feel like the Arizona State Sun Devils are going to be one of those teams where they're going to pull off an upset like this and kind of put a team on the brink. Because Oregon, this is the one game left in their regular season schedule that they cannot afford to lose. I feel like the rest of the way, everybody has a better schedule. If you lose to Arizona, I don't feel like it's going to hurt you that much, just because it's on the road, number 3 team in the country. You'd like to get those home games against UCLA and USC. You'd like to get the games in Seattle, but those are a little bit more understanding. Those teams are better, in a much better place, have more, I wouldn't say have more talent. Arizona State has some good talent. It's just, I don't know what's wrong with them necessarily. They just can't shoot and can't score. But I think that getting that win on the road going into Saturday's game against Arizona is going to give them confidence. But if you lose that game, man, I feel like it's over for their at-large chances unless they win out. I think that's the only way. If they lose to Arizona State, I think they have to win out to get an at-large bid, because, you just can't afford to lose a game like that and then stumble against the top teams in the Pac-12 either.
Another note I wanted to add for Oregon basketball is it really just feels like this team is so consistently inconsistent. They had a really good stretch, heading into that Cal game, which I think made the loss that much more surprising. And then I feel like they have a lot of really talented guys, super athletic guys, but a lot of the times it just feels like they're not really playing in sync or playing as a team. It's like if they get off to a rough start, it kind of just ends up with looking like kind of like hero ball. And, you have guys taking ISOs, settling for terrible looks at times. Especially like you mentioned earlier, like just hoisting threes when you have to. So it seems like they need, hopefully 2 guys to kind of be shooting more consistently. And then you got to win the battle down low for sure. One last note on the Arizona State matchup. I was DMing our Arizona State publisher, Donnie Druin, about tonight's game, just kind of trying to get some of his, actually, I don't know if he's the publisher, but he covers Arizona State for SI on all Sun Devils. And he says, I think Oregon handles ASU. They've just been too streaky this year, and I can't trust them to shoot well on any night. So look for Arizona State to lean on DJ Horn. I think that, he's kind of been one of the main guys for the Sun Devils, but no doubt this is another must-win game for the Ducks here.
Yeah, and I think Jalen Graham is another guy that the big guys are going to have to worry about. He's kind of a walking double-double in a team that's just, like you said, super inconsistent. He's one of those guys that's been consistently putting up good rebounding numbers. But, yeah, it seems like they're a team that just, when they are struggling to shoot, they're really struggling. So if Oregon can up their defense and force tough shots, they're in a really good spot. But offensively, like we've talked about for, a good chunk of this section, they're going to have to shoot the ball well and give the ball in the hands of their best players.
All right, moving on to our very last story here, Dylan. We got just a couple more minutes here on this episode of the pod. Shifting over to women's basketball. On Wednesday afternoon, Oregon women's basketball took care of UCLA. Final score of 67-53. Ducks were up by 20 at halftime. So it kind of felt like they definitely let the Bruins back in this one a little bit in that third quarter, but we're ultimately able to put the Bruins away on Wednesday in Eugene. Now they're getting set up to welcome Cal and then Stanford to town this weekend. Cal being on Friday, Stanford on Sunday. I feel a lot more confident about this women's team. I feel like than the men's team. I feel like there's still some things that they need to work out and that they're looking to kind of hone in on before the tournament, but they're in a much more comfortable spot than the men are as far as postseason projections go.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I wanted to address, it felt like so many people were saying it seemed like UCLA, they let them back into it. UCLA is a super tough team. I mean, they've been through a ton this year with injuries and COVID stuff. They're starting to get healthy, but even when they only could play like 6-7 players, they've just been a tough team to beat. So I wasn't really surprised that UCLA was hanging tough in that game. But I do think it's great that Oregon was able to kind of put them away in the last few minutes, because I know it got close to like that 10, 11 point range. And then in the last few minutes, they were able to put some buckets together and put them away. I think the big thing that was really important was that Powell kind of found her stroke a little bit from 3, especially. The last few games, since she had that 3-game streak of 20-plus points, she's only been shooting, I believe, like 36% since then. And so I think she was 5 of 13 overall. So still not the numbers you want to see, but a little bit better. And India Rogers has just been such an underrated pickup for Oregon. I mean, she's just been quietly having a phenomenal season, arguably one of her best seasons. Efficiently, she's shooting the ball really efficient. When she's on, she is on. Nira Sabali back in the starting lineup, I think, is huge. I think she got banged up again against UCLA. And so I hope she's, ready to go against Cal, because they're going to need her. Cal's a big team.
Yeah. So looking at Cal, they're 11-8, 1-6 in the Pac-12, heading into Friday's matchup against Oregon in Eugene at Matthew Knight Arena. For Oregon, I really like what I saw out of Niara Sabali. She has obviously been a huge, piece of this Oregon team this year. I also liked what I saw out of Sedona Prince. I think, she's been coming off the bench recently. And I think that if you can get her, kind of more in a groove, I feel like she was definitely finding her stroke a little bit more yesterday with that nice turnaround jumper that she has in the post. That thing's like unguardable, man, when she gets, defended, because, she's 6'7", so not a whole lot of girls in the Pac-12 that can match that size. But if you can have someone as dominant as Sabali, who I think honestly is a little stubborn at times in the post, she gets the ball down low and she's saying, I'm going to shoot this layup, regardless of what I see on defense. But I love her fire and her physicality. But yeah, having Prince come off the bench is just such a tremendous asset, I think, for Kelly Graves. And I asked him about Sedona after yesterday's game, and he was saying, I feel like I've told you guys a million times, like, if we want to go where this team can get, we need Niara and Sedona playing some of their best basketball. Definitely got to give a shout out to India Rogers. She's just super crafty. I feel like every women's game that I cover, I'm texting you saying, bro, she's such a bucket. So she's really fun to watch. That big three of Pow Rogers and Sabali, believe, combined for 43 points on Wednesday night. And then Graves said he also made a conscious decision before the game that he wanted to play 12 players. We saw players like Shannon Dufusy, Filipina Kai getting more involved. Taylor Hosendove even got on the floor as well. So important for the Ducks to kind of get everybody involved here as they get ready for the Pac-12 tournament coming up. And then ultimately, when it comes to March Madness, you want to have everybody ready to go.
I do want to correct you. It's Filipina Che.
Che.
Last name.
Che. Oh, yeah. Man, I'm sorry. That was just totally butchered that. I appreciate that. Filipina Che.
Yeah, it's all good. No, I think those players specifically, Sabali, Prince, and even Che off the bench, I think they're going to be big because Cal's got some really athletic, bigs down there. Jaden Daniels is 6'3". She can kind of play the guard forward position. She was a player I really liked watching last year as a freshman. Michelle Onya off the bench was a really solid player at 6'3". I pray I get this name right. Evelyn Lucius Shipholt, I believe is her name. She's 6'2". She's a forward, super talented. So they were a really, really poor team last year. I believe they won one game. We're just getting rocked. And, it's been a tough go of it in the Pac-12 slate, but they're still a tough out. They're a much better team. They returned pretty much everybody. So this is not an easy team to put away. You like that they're at home for this game, I believe, right?
Yep. It's in Eugene.
Yeah, so that's a big plus, but I think the player for Cal you got to watch is Jada Curry. I mean, her last name's Curry, and she wears 30 from the Bay Area, and she can shoot like crazy. She's a really, really good shooter. She's a true freshman. She's fantastic. She's kind of been the lead scorer for Cal, and I wasn't not really expecting her to contribute right away, and she's been phenomenal. I believe she's in the top 5 in scoring. In the Pac-12. Let me double check that. Oh, she's number 1, 19.2 points per game. I stand corrected. Yeah, she's doing better than I thought. Scoring almost 20 a game.
Man, yeah, she's really balling, playing some good basketball, it sounds like. Obviously, this game against Cal, Graves, said that he wants to stay focused on this game against Cal and not look too far ahead to Stanford and what lies ahead. But maybe that's the note we can kind of wrap this one on, Dylan. Based on what you've seen from this women's team, we've been talking about it, obviously, and kind of crunching the numbers a bit, looking at some of these games recently. Do you think this team has a good shot at beating Stanford? I mean, that's, top dog really in the Pac-12. Them and Arizona are some of the best teams.
couple months ago, I would have said yes. But Stanford is starting to rout everybody they're playing, because Stanford got off to a tough start. I mean, reigning national champions, they were really struggling. Which was kind of surprised because it returned so many people. But now they're starting to turn the corner, and they're just lighting teams up. I mean, they're shooting lights out. They're defending the heck out of the ball. They're really finding their groove. So, man, I don't know. It's really tough because Stanford is just kind of in this groove that you kind of saw them in late last year when, even though they weren't playing on their home court, they were still beating up everybody. Right now, I'd probably say no. I feel like you would need just a really just put together complete performance against a team like that. Offensively, you have to be sound, play fundamental ball. It's hard to defend a team like that. I mean, Cameron Brink is, just been one of the best players. Haley Jones, I think, is unguardable when she's got the ball in transition at her size. And she's, in my opinion, one of the top two passers in the country, her and Caitlin Clark. And they're just a team that just plays sound ball. So I just don't think they're beatable right now by anybody probably other than Arizona in the Pac-12.
You talked about how they've been routing teams of late. Just I got their schedule pulled up here just to give people a taste of kind of what that looks like. The last close game that they really played was against Arizona at the end of last month, and they won 75-69 at home in Palo Alto. But so far in February, Dylan, well, here are the scores. February 3rd, Stanford against UCLA. Stanford wins 76-48. They win 83-57 over USC, 82-59 over Oregon State, who just beat Oregon on Sunday, and then over Utah, 91-64, and Colorado on Sunday, February 13th, 63-46. So Stanford's got Oregon State in Corvallis before they get here this weekend. I figure if you're looking at this from Oregon's perspective, at least, Stanford has to play a pretty tough opponent before they get here to Eugene. But I think I agree. I mean, I'm not ruling it out completely, because I think if this team plays to its full potential and gets good contributions from everybody and locks in a little bit more, I think they can keep it close, but and maybe even win it. But I think it's definitely a bit of a long shot right now.
Well, playing at home is huge because, last year, Oregon, they did play a really tight game at Matthew Knight Arena. And I felt like that team was a bit further away from beating a team like that, because you saw Oregon last year, just a really young team. It just didn't feel like they were ready for that stage to play against those championship caliber teams. And then they went into the Bay Area. They played, the score might not say it, but I think they played a really solid game against Stanford earlier in the year. But Stanford, I mean, they're just the best team in the Pac-12. I know Arizona's up there too, but when you put two and two together and you look at what Stanford has done this season, just they're outscoring teams by 17 points a game. I mean, that's just crazy. They're number 2 in scoring. They're the number 1 team in field goal percentage offensively and defensively. They only allow teams to shoot 35%. And the teams that you were just listing off that they were beating, maybe aside from USC, those are pretty good teams. I mean, UCLA is a pretty good team. Oregon State's a good team. Utah is a lot better, and they absolutely rocked them. Colorado's a good team. So Stanford's just on another level, reigning national champions, loaded with future WNBA talent. I feel like this is as good a shot as they've had since Sabrina was on the team. When, Stanford came to town, it was a national televised game, and they just lit them up. Sabrina had 37. I feel like this is their best chance since then. I don't think they're going to do what that Oregon team did, but I feel like they have a good chance. I don't know if they're ready yet, but I hope I'm proven wrong, because it would be a massive, massive win for Oregon and a big shift at the top of the Pac-12.
So we just talked about a bunch of hoops action for the Ducks coming up. We'll have Graham Metzger covering the Arizona State game tonight, so definitely follow him for some updates there. And then we have Billy Spots going out to the Cal game tomorrow night. And then Graham and I will be in Eugene at a Matthew Knight for Stanford and Oregon on Sunday. But before we get out of here, Dylan, is there any other notes you kind of wanted to add? I know we're a little bit longer than we had planned, so apologies for that, my guy. But what anything else you wanted to add before we bounce?
No, I like how this women's team's kind of coming into form. I guess if I could, wrap up with the women's section, I like that. It feels like they're starting to extend their rotation a bit, like you talked about, playing 12 players. And it's funny because Kelly Graves, long before the season started, said, I feel like we should have kind of a shorter roster a little bit because of the last season. Just felt like some players weren't happy with their roles. You saw players transfer. It just seemed like he was playing too many people, and he admitted that, at the end of last season. And now you're starting to see him stretch it out, which is, I like that it's happening now, just because, you're in mid-February, you kind of know what you've got at this point. You're starting to get healthy. You're playing the best teams in the Pac-12 coming up this weekend. Maybe not Cal, but Stanford. So I feel like you need everybody on deck to beat teams like that and to round into March and get where you want to go.
All right. Yeah, a lot of good insight from Dylan there on the women's team and kind of where they're at right now. That's all we have for you guys on this episode of the podcast. Thanks for sticking around and hanging in there with us as we try out something new. Hopefully you guys like this kind of new format of the podcast, kind of with various news headlines all around the Ducks and the Pac-12. So it's definitely been really fun. Dylan, where can people find more of you on the socials and all that? Definitely want to give you a chance to plug that.
Try not to sneeze right now. I have an air freshener right there, and it just got a whiff of it. Try not to sneeze on camera, so I muted myself for a second. You can find me on Twitter at DRK Sports News. I'm tweeting about Oregon football and recruiting and a little bit of basketball here and there. You can find my work on Ducks Digest, find my work on the transfer portal. We added a ton of new people, so go check out their work at tportalcfb on Twitter. They just launched a Instagram as well, so go follow us over there. I believe it's at tportalcfb as well.
All right, there you have it there. If you guys want to follow me, find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at mtorresports. If you want to find more Oregon Ducks content, you already know where you got to head over. Stay here on the YouTube channel or check out some of the other episodes of the Ducks Dish podcast. Go ahead, give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. But ducksdigest.com is definitely where you want to go for the written content. We are at Ducks Digest on all the other social platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a free daily newsletter, the Ducks Digest newsletter. So if you go over my Twitter profile, you can find that right there and sign up for free. So, don't want to ramble on too much, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Shout out to Rube for joining us today, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.